Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi. InsyaAllah hari ini kita ada sesi sidang media untuk kita dapatkan sedikit gambaran tentang situasi terkini yang sedang berlaku di Syria dan juga di Palestin, dan kemudian kita juga ada appeal untuk bantuan misi kemanusiaan sempena musim sejuk yang sedang terjadi sekarang, yang memberi kesan kepada ribuan mereka yang kehilangan tempat tinggal, tempat berlindung di Syria dan juga di Gaza, Palestin. Jadi pada mereka yang sedang menonton di laman-laman sosial Global Peace Mission Malaysia GPM, kalau anda boleh dengar suara saya dengan jelas, boleh komen dekat bawah jelas, dan kalau ada mungkin gangguan bunyi dan sebagainya, boleh komen tak dengar ataupun bunyi kurang jelas, supaya pasukan media kita boleh perbetulkan sebelum kita memulakan sesi kita pada pagi ini, insyaAllah. Okey, baik. Kita dah boleh mula ke untuk sesi media? Okey. Siapa yang ada sedang mendengar, boleh komen jelas ataupun tidak jelas, dan juga boleh share link-link mana-mana platform yang anda sedang menonton sekarang bersama dengan kawan-kawan anda, keluarga anda, dan supaya seluruh masyarakat Malaysia cakna yang kita sekarang ada satu sesi sidang media khas berkenaan dengan Syria dan juga Palestin. Jadi sebelum bermula, itulah kita lakukan sedikit sesi check up ataupun untuk membetulkan dari segi sudut media teknikal kita, dan juga kita bagi ruang masa untuk yang sedang menonton sekarang sama-sama berkongsi pautan mana-mana laman web ataupun sosial media kepada rakan-rakan anda, keluarga anda, supaya kita dapat sama-sama menonton. Baik, sekali lagi Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi kepada semua yang sedang menonton sidang media yang kita akan laksanakan pada pagi ini berkenaan dengan untuk kita sama-sama kemaskini situasi semasa yang sedang berlaku di Syria dan juga di Palestin, terutamanya Gaza, dan kemudian kita juga ada winter appeal untuk misi kemanusiaan kita sempena musim sejuk yang sedang berlanjutan sekarang. Jadi bersama saya pada hari ini adalah Encik Syariah Asfar Saleh yang merupakan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif untuk Global Peace Mission Malaysia GPM. Assalamualaikum. Selamat pagi. Dan together with us also today is Dr. Muhammad Qutub. Welcome Dr. Qutub to our office. Dr. Qutub is a social activist and also advocator for the Syrian issue yang sudah lama bersama-sama dengan kita dalam melaksanakan advokasi berkenaan dengan isu-isu yang berlaku di Syria. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Dr. Qutub to explain the current situation that were happening in Syria, and maybe a little bit update on the ground, the story of what is the reaction of the people in Syria, and also the response for the international citizen as well. Please, Doctor.
Jazakumullahu khairan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I praise Allah Almighty and I send prayers and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his noble family, righteous companions, and all those that follow them with right guidance until the day of judgment. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm happy to be with the Global Peace Mission to talk about these two very important areas of the world, and technically we can consider them one area, but we will say more about this inshallah soon. I am here to give a quick situation update about Gaza and Syria, and following the title I will start with Gaza first, and then I will talk about Syria as well and the important connections between them inshallah. Gaza, as you all know, is the bleeding wound that continues to bleed until now. Has been bleeding for many, many years actually. But the most recent bout of violence is that which started, of course, from October 7, 2023, has been going now for almost 15 months. Almost 15 months, the genocidal Israeli government and its supporters have been killing people with complete impunity in Gaza. And what we see is that continuously they are performing these crimes, there are obviously objections, even from the international community, but they continue to commit these crimes with impunity. Interestingly, just recently now, 11 United Nations experts who are not technically representatives of the United Nations, but they are UN experts, actually came out and said that Israel at this time faces no real consequences for the crimes that they are committing. Of course, this is just stating the obvious, we all know this, but to come from United Nations experts in this way is important. And this despite the fact that the ICJ has issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant. But yet, the killing goes on as normal, because this is what Israel does best. Kill, kill, and kill more. And even some of their geostrategists, when they were allowed to speak freely, they said it this way: we need to keep killing and killing and killing. So this is what they do. They call themselves the Jewish state. The Jewish state continues to kill and maim and destroy, while the poor Palestinians do not have the chance to build that they would like so much. Most recently, we are witnessing the crimes against the Kamal Udwan hospital, the burning of the Kamal Udwan hospital. The Israelis have targeted hospitals, places of worship, masajid and churches, schools, United Nations, also United Nations Relief Agency. They are targeting everything they can. They've targeted journalists. Of course, so many of the journalists have been killed. So the most recent now is the Kamal Udwan hospital. They destroyed it, they burnt it. They are going after the injured and sometimes the dead as well. You might have heard that they are stealing corpses as well and doing God knows what with it. And of course, the crime of kidnapping the director of the hospital, Hussam Abu Safiya, and his whereabouts until now are unknown. It seems quite probable that they want to use him as a hostage for some kind of a deal, because they have been, they've been negotiating for the hostage deal. They continue to destroy, they continue in their genocide, and they think that if they continue to destroy in Gaza, they'll be able to get their hostages back. However, it has become blatantly clear that the only way they're going to get their hostages back is through a deal. And of course, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu is avoiding this because it is very bad for his political career. Because once the war ends, he as a politician is finished. So this is why he must continue with the war. Even though more and more of the Israeli population is coming out and saying very clearly, we want a hostage deal. Stop the war. We want our hostages back. Subhanallah, it seems the whole globe went berserk over the kidnapping of a few hundred hostages, though there are thousands upon thousands of Palestinian hostages now in Israeli jail, because that's exactly what they are. Please be careful with the terms. They are not prisoners, they are hostages, because they take them for whatever reason and they imprison them for many, many years, let them out, and then they bring them back. In several deals that happened for prisoner exchanges, they would release them and then they would imprison them again, even in the Gaza war itself. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. These are part of the continuing crimes of the Israeli genocidal entity. Of course, the state which they continue to call the Jewish state, they want us to call it the Jewish state. So it seems the Jewish state is committing a genocide which many people, many of the free people and freedom-loving people of the world have condemned over and over. But again, the problem is that a lot of that condemnation is happening from the grassroots, from the general population. When will that condemnation now be on the level of those in authority, enough to stop these people. Even with an ICJ warrant for arrest, they are still committing their crimes because they know that they are going to be protected. So it means that it has to be not only one president or one prime minister, but many of the influential in the world who needs to put a stop and needs to pull the plug on these genocidal maniacs. What you hear also, most recently, and very unfortunately, is that the Israelis are not the only ones doing their killing, but also some of their agents, okay? And of course, maybe they wouldn't like to be called agents of the Israelis, but when you look at the reality, it seems that this is exactly what is happening, okay? Which is the Palestinian Authority, right, in the West Bank. So lately we are seeing what is happening in Jenin as well, right, in the Jenin camp. The Palestinian Authority now is going after a lot of the freedom fighters, people who are supporting Gaza, activists. They are going after these people now and doing the dirty work of the Israelis and have treated them in the worst way. So now this is Palestinian against Palestinian. This is also very, very dangerous. And unfortunately, Mahmoud Abbas came out and said it very clearly that the only solution is a military one against his own people, against the Palestinian people, imagine. So of course, the Israelis are very happy with this, and they continue their own incursions into the West Bank, imprisoning many people in the West Bank. So also, don't get too caught up in what's going on in Gaza and forget about the West Bank. The Israelis want it all, right? Because we know that the concentration on North Gaza, especially in the last 2 months, the concentration on North Gaza, the siege and the evacuation orders, all of this seeks to begin or be the precursor for the annexation of Gaza. This is what is called for now, the annexation of Gaza, such that Gaza will be under Israeli authority. How? That's a different matter, and there will be different opinions about it, because just like the Israelis unilaterally left Gaza some 20 years ago or so, less than 20 years ago, they don't want to be completely in control. They'd rather have someone do their dirty work, kind of like what's happening in the West Bank. But what they have said very clearly is, we are going to take back Gaza so that they can rule it under an iron fist, the way they would like to do. Of course, what is in store? We thought that after all the crimes, after this genocide going on for almost 15 months, that eventually it would end. We never expected it to go this long, all right? The original October 7 attack, which was also, of course, an act of resistance against a brutal military occupation that has been in place for some 76 years. That attack killed how many Israelis? About 1,100 and something. 1,140. Some say 1,200. It's less. It's about 1,140. A third of which, or whom, a third of whom are not civilians. They're of the military. So they are the criminals that are performing these crimes. A third of whom, right? So because of that, they have killed now, according to official figures, more than 45,000 incredible human beings. This is according to official figures. The wounded are more than double that, some 108,000 or more. But these are official figures, my brothers and sisters, and these are gross underestimates of the reality. The number is much higher. In fact, I have done videos just months ago, and I mentioned the figure of 42,000 or 43,000, and the counter seems to have stopped. It happened with us in Syria as well, where the counter just stops all of a sudden, and you think that there's no more killing going on. Of course, it continues. And this is why months ago, many American physicians, surgeons, nurses, and health practitioners, some 45 of them, wrote an urgent letter to the Biden administration pleading with them to stop arming Israel because the real death toll is more than double what you hear today, closer to 92,000 rather than 45,000. This was months ago. Later on, they wrote a second letter to the Biden administration, the same group, but now double the number, some 99 of them, wrote a second letter to the Biden administration, again pleading with them to stop arming Israel because the number of dead had reached almost 119,000. This was several months ago. We're talking about a death toll that has gone beyond 100,000 people. Not 45,000. And of course, if you look at, this is just those who have been killed due to the direct effect of the violence. But if you look at the indirect causes of death that will continue after the genocide is over, because of the deteriorating health conditions and what have you, the number, according to the world-renowned medical journal Lancet, the number may go up as high as 186,000 human beings. So this 45,000 you keep hearing is a gross underestimate. The situation is much worse. Not to mention that the counter sometimes seems to stop or malfunction, but people are still being killed, people are being tortured, people are being starved, people are being displaced. Sources mention that 9 out of 10, so 90% of the Gazan population is now displaced. And you know what displaced means. It means you are out of your house, you might be living in a tent, you might be living in a tent that cannot possibly face this very severe winter that is coming. It's looking like a severe winter, and already until now, 6 or 7 people have died because of the cold, because of freezing to death. 6 of whom are children, they're newborns. I think 5 are newborns, and 1 is a child, a little bit older. They froze to death. Allahu Akbar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with them and help them. So this winter appeal, inshallah, is something that is very critical and crucial, and hopefully it will deliver some much needed assistance to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Of course, we see that there is resistance. The resistance continues. The self-defense by the Palestinian people continues. The Palestinians continue to defend themselves against this genocide, and there are attempts to help them also from outside. Most recently, we saw the attacks also from Yemen, the ballistic missiles that were shot at Israel, and over 1 million Israelis were forced to flee to shelters and bunkers after those missile attacks. And those continue as well, missile attacks and drone attacks. And the geopolitical situation might be a little bit more complicated to explain, but I can say more about it maybe if there are questions concerning it. With regards to Syria, in the midst of what we are calling Tufan al-Aqsa, in the midst of the Gaza genocide, Syria was finally liberated. Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. In an event that Syrians are still marveling at until today, and that has shocked the world and continues to shock people. Because after some 54 bloody years of an Assad family dictatorship and over 60 years of Ba'ath Party rule from 1953, Sorry, 63, from 1963 all the way up until now. And almost 14 years of another bloody genocide against the Syrian people by its own leader. 14 years, almost 14 years of a bloody revolution. Syria was finally liberated in a very quick 11-day advance. Allahu Akbar. The situation of Syria, we're talking about less than a month after the liberation. This is just less than a month after the liberation. Already, the leader was toppled. He fled to Russia, completely left all of his supporters and all of his people, and you can hear his supporters. If you see the videos, you can see the supporters complaining and even insulting him. You left us. You just left us and went and you fled. You didn't inform anyone. He didn't inform any of the very big criminals who have done some of the worst crimes in Syria. Inform them, let them know so that they can also flee with you. Of course, you are the number one, but you know, they were there for you. They did all the dirty work. No, he just fled and he left everyone. Supposedly even his own brother, who was in charge of a lot of those crimes, didn't even know that he was leaving and he was going to. Until the last minute, his own prime minister, the night before he fled, calls him up. What's happening? He said, we'll talk tomorrow. And by tomorrow, Bashar al-Assad was already in Moscow. This is the kind of person who was leading, quote unquote, the president of Syria for over 2 decades. Of course, upon the liberation, understandably, the Syrians all went out celebrating a much awaited liberation, their much awaited freedom from this tyrannical regime, one of the most tyrannical regimes that we have seen in history. And we continue to discover the extent of their crimes until today. And although what we are seeing in Gaza is a genocide, and we say what happened in Syria is also a genocide, but what happened in Syria is a genocide by the country's own leadership, not a foreign enemy, right? Which makes it that much more staggering and unacceptable. I'm sure you saw the Syrian people celebrating, coming out in their possibly hundreds of thousands, if not more, celebrating the fall of the regime, regardless of the people or the fighters that liberated them from the Assad regime. I say this because there may be some differences of opinion about the group that actually led the battle that is called Udwan, the deterring aggression battle, which during that 11 days was able to topple Assad. So it all started out, as you know, from the enclave in Idlib, where the Russians and the Iranians were helping the Assad regime to put all of the resistance. So years ago, they laid sieges on many of the areas around Damascus and in other provinces in order to force everyone who is anti-Assad into Idlib, in preparation to finally completely destroying them. And they were preparing to do so just before the battle of deterring aggression started in November 27. Yeah? So this is why the resistance fighters then launched this battle, calling it deterring aggression. They are going to deter the aggression that they were about to face from them. And subhanallah, people were shocked because they were making advances and the Syrian regime supporters and military were just fleeing from their positions. This happened as they went to Aleppo, liberated Halab in the northwest Aleppo, and then Hama, and then the rest of Idlib, and then got to Homs, and then slowly started going towards Damascus. While other groups now, from the south, from Dar'a, were also going upwards, and they met in Damascus. This happened over the course of 11 days. According to one well-renowned Syrian commentator and military expert, he said this advance should be taught in military schools. While we know that the Assad regime supporters and military completely fled their positions, but we also know that the way that the battle happened and the way they advanced was all according to very well drawn out plans and strategies. Soon after the liberation, the leader of what is called إدارة العمليات العسكرية, the military operations management, Ahmad al-Shara', assumed power. So he is the de facto leader of Syria at the moment, and very quickly they started assigning the rest of the ministers in the government and announced them for all to know in a very transparent step. Even the Minister of Intelligence and Intelligence Operations, none of whom you knew or heard about or saw their picture during the Assad regime, because they need to be unknown and anonymous so that they can commit their crimes. But here now, very transparently, everyone's names and CVs were made public so that everyone knows who they are. This is the present government, present transitional government that is serving now, and they said that they will be in power until March of 2025, so for the next 3 months or so. Of course, the transitional period seems like it will continue for quite a while, because, my brothers and sisters, Syria is a destroyed country. Bashar al-Assad and his regime destroyed the country, the people, and the infrastructure over the course of his 20 years, and more specifically, almost the 14 years of the time of the revolution. So, but it is the sacrifices now of those 14 years or so which made the events of the 11 days for the final collapse possible. It is part and parcel. They are well connected. You cannot disconnect it. It's not just 11 days and it collapsed. 14 years from the time of the first protest, when they came out and they started protesting against this tyrannical regime. Of course, as we can see, the present administration, Syrian administration or government, has been recognized by many of the countries of the world. Most recently, even the Gulf Cooperation Council have visited. The foreign minister of Kuwait, delegations from Saudi and Bahrain and Qatar have all visited. Of course, even before them, the Europeans and the Americans. So the Americans visited, the British, they all visited and showed recognition for the present government, and some admiration for the way in which they are making decisions in a very critical and difficult juncture, which is part of why you can see the happiness on the faces of the Syrian people, because they understand that ultimately it is the Syrian people and their support that allowed this regime to fall. And ultimately, this is the most important aspect of the whole situation. Liberation from the Assad regime. Any other difficulties we deal with after that. You first remove the main obstacle, which is this police state that has ruled for over 54 years. You probably saw difficulties lie ahead. The Assad regime will not leave us alone. His supporters will not leave us alone. Immediately, the new leadership apparently was too soft, as many Syrians have said as well, and criticized. Because immediately when they assumed leadership, they started to deal with people in the way which we as a Syrian people, and I would say Arabs and Muslims in general, would deal, and they granted pardon to so many people, some of whom may have been involved in some of those crimes, though they didn't immediately hold them accountable. And soon after, we saw then some kind of a counter-revolution, so they started attacking some of the forces, and they actually killed 14 and they injured others. Mainly in the coast of Syria and Tartus in the northwest, and also in other areas, even around Damascus as well, and Homs and other places. So there is a lot to do now. There are a lot of obstacles in order to keep the peace and to go after those criminals. People with blood on their hands, people who have imprisoned and tortured people to death. These people are still around in Syria, and some have run away. And of course, their leader, Bashar al-Assad, is now being called. There are calls now for the extradition of Assad from Moscow so that he can be brought to Syria, so that he can be held accountable for his crimes. We are still discovering the extent of the genocide. You may have seen how they immediately started liberating the political prisoners from so many of the prisons, especially Saidnaya. Saidnaya became very famous. They tried to free everyone they can, and though they have freed maybe over 30,000 people, the official number for those still officially forcibly disappeared is over 112,000 still missing. People are still looking for their loved ones, and they don't know what happened to them. And different organizations seem to feel that most probably they have been killed by the Assad regime. So to a large extent, it may be a lost hope, but obviously for those families, they will continue to search. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them and help us all. Of course, until now, brothers and sisters, the numbers of those killed in Syria is not clear. You will see all kinds of strange numbers. And part of it is the difficulty in documentation, especially when people were too afraid to come out. The regime used to call on particular families and say, you go and you bury your killed son alone. You don't tell anyone. And you don't do any kind of protest, right? People were afraid to come out. So you will hear numbers as low as 200-something thousand, and as high as 1 million people over the course of 14 years. In addition to all of those who were imprisoned and tortured to death, people who were tortured to death, including women and children. Of course, the displaced and the refugees, almost 7 million displaced inside Syria and 7 million refugees outside of Syria. That's 14 million. That's almost the entire population at this time, because originally the population of Syria was 23 million. Then when you remove the 7 million refugees, you're talking about 16 million, half of whom are displaced within Syria, also languishing in camps in different areas and having to face the difficulty of this severe winter. The latest numbers tell us that only about 12% of those requiring aid have received some kind of aid in terms of food and in terms of heating materials. Only 12%. And whatever they received will only last for maybe 1 or 1.5 months. So the need is very dire, and this makes your appeal today and your press conference today, very important. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place barakah in it. Shall we stop it there? Gaza and Syria. Gaza and Syria, nowadays we know them as Gaza and Syria. In the past, they might have been known as Gaza or Asqalan and Dimashq. Unfortunately, we know since the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement, the French and the British have now separated us on a map, drawing these different lines, and therefore this blessed land of Ash-Sham, also known historically as the Levant, was separated into these four countries that we now call Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. All of this area is known as the blessed land of Ash-Sham. Islamically, when we talk about the land of Ash-Sham, this is what is being mentioned. So ultimately, people before 1916 and way before that do not know or might not know what you're talking about when we say things like this, Jordan or Syria or Lebanon. It was one area, but you had these different emirates, these different provinces. So you have Dimashq, you have Aleppo, you have Gaza, you have Al-Quds and others. All of it is part of the blessed land of Ash-Sham. Al-Imam Al-Izz ibn Abd Salam, the famous Islamic scholar, said that the best city after Al-Quds is Dimashq, is Damascus, which has just been liberated. So despite now all of the geopolitics, all of the spin, all of the strange things that you might hear about how now the fall of Syria has somehow weakened the axis of resistance, we look at the land of Ash-Sham as one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed that this one area to be liberated. We hope inshallah that the liberation will continue, and that inshallah the plots of the plotters and the counter-revolutions which have already started, we hope inshallah also will all fail, and we will do our best in order to stave them off. After that, when you have strong leadership in Syria, this can only help our Palestinian brothers and sisters. People who know about this area and its history and the religious connections know the importance of the liberation of Damascus. And this is why some of the Palestinian leaders themselves, without mentioning names, have said that the liberation of Al-Aqsa actually goes through Damascus. But like I said, there's a lot of spin. There are a lot of different things that you are hearing. But this is mainly because of the access of Iran and the chaos that it has caused in many of the Arab capitals. However, still attacking Israel in one way or another, because for them that is their only lifeline. That is the only way to prove to the majority of Muslims that they are also part and parcel of this struggle, and that they are on our side in the struggle. The Syrian revolution, however, has shown us that they are not on our side. And as soon as they had the upper hand, how they stood by the tyrant and committed crimes against the Syrian people, just like the tyrant himself. So the things that Hezbollah did in Homs is almost exactly the same as what the Assad regime has been doing. All right? So what sense does it make to condemn that genocide that's going on in Gaza? Bashar al-Assad condemned the genocide in Gaza many times and held many conferences to help the poor beleaguered people of Gaza. But his own Syrian people are languishing in prisons and suffering torture people cannot even imagine. So that connection is there now. And for different reasons, because of the sacrifices of our brothers and sisters in Gaza and their resistance to the genocide and the tyranny of the Jewish state. Because of that, we saw that the liberation of Syria was also made possible. So, inshallah, as we rebuild Syria and make it stronger after everything that happened, the Syrian people and all Arabs and Muslims, the peoples, as you know, they stand with their brothers and sisters. The Arab and Muslim populations they are like one. They know each other's pains and they support each other's pains, and especially those who are in Ash-Sham. So this is not something to worry about, but rather this is something which Israel themselves fear. The Zionists fear this themselves, and that's why you saw them go on this destruction spree as they started bombing and trying to completely remove all of the weapons that are left in Syria, lest it now come into the hands of a leadership that might actually use it against them in the future. But when it was in the hands of Bashar al-Assad, it was safe. So you can keep it. But as soon as he fell, they started going and destroying those weapons, and of course doing what they do best as well, which is grabbing more and more land. So this is why they started going in from the Golan Heights and started grabbing more and more land, of course, and the strategic location of Jabal al-Sheikh, also known as Mount Hermon, okay, the highest point in the Syrian landscape, from which they can see Damascus itself, the capital. So they grabbed land, and they even started showing aggression to the Syrian people in those areas. Because when the Syrian people came out, they started shooting at some of them and killing some of them. So their aggression now is against the Syrian people as well. But at this moment in time, there's so much international pressure. The satellites of the globe are now on Syria and Damascus, and it's a completely destroyed country. We need to rebuild. There's a lot to rebuild. Then later on, inshallah, this will mean that the efforts by all free peoples of the world to rid our Palestinian brothers and sisters of the tyranny and injustice that they're under will be successful by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The liberation of Syria is a message of hope to all who are suffering injustice and persecution in Gaza and the West Bank and beyond. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you Dr. Kutub for your sharing, for the story that you shared to us, all of us. Seperti mana yang kita dengar daripada Dr. Kutub tadi, menceritakan bagaimana keadaan di Gaza sekarang, yang mana 9 daripada 10 penduduk Gaza adalah sebagai, kita sebutkan sebagai internal displaced people ataupun pelarian dalam negara yang tidak mempunyai rumah, yang tidak mempunyai tempat perlindungan ataupun tempat mereka pulang, dan lebih daripada 45,000 nyawa telah terkorban, dan sejumlah besarnya adalah tergolong daripada golongan wanita dan juga kanak-kanak, tidak terlepas juga bayi yang tidak terlibat langsung dalam peperangan yang sedang berlanjutan. Dan di bahagian yang lain juga, Dr. Kutub tadi menceritakan perihal berkenaan Syria, bagaimana Syria sekarang sudah bebas daripada tirani kuku besi pemerintahan keluarga Assad yang telah berlanjutan sehingga berpuluh-puluh tahun. Seperti mana yang Dr. Kutub ceritakan tadi, jumlah sebenar orang-orang yang terkorban ini tidak dapat digambarkan. Barangkali sepanjang pemerintahan keluarga Assad, Bashar al-Assad yang telah lari ke Moskow, lebih daripada 1 juta orang. Itulah yang diceritakan, recap sedikit daripada apa yang dimaklumkan oleh Dr. Kutub. Kemudian kita sambung kembali kita punya sesi bersama dengan saudara Syahri Aswar Saleh yang merupakan Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Global Peace Mission Malaysia, untuk beliau berkongsi berkenaan dengan kenyataan media berkenaan Syria dan juga Palestin. Silakan.
Baik. Terima kasih banyak kepada saudara Nik Muhammad, and very thank you to Dr. Muhammad Kutub for sharing the current updates of the situation of Syria and Gaza. and what is happening and what's going to happen in the future, insyaAllah. And we are very hopeful. Kita looking forward after the liberation of Syria, insyaAllah, very soon going to be the liberation of Gaza and Palestine as a whole, insyaAllah. Baik, untuk hari ini sebagaimana yang kita maklumkan bahawa kita akan melaksanakan press conference berkaitan dengan pelancaran bantuan musim sejuk untuk Gaza dan Syria, dan saya akan bacakan kenyataan media untuk Global Peace Mission Malaysia berkaitan perkara tersebut. Kenyataan media 31 Disember 2024, rayuan mendesak tahap global, krisis kemanusiaan di Gaza dan Syria perlu ditangani dengan segera. Krisis dan situasi kemanusiaan di Gaza dan Syria telah mencapai tahap yang sangat kritikal dan ia memerlukan campur tangan dan sokongan global dengan segera. Di Gaza, seperti mana yang telah dikongsikan oleh Dr. Muhammad Kutub sebentar tadi, konflik yang berterusan semenjak 7 Oktober 2023 yang lepas telah meragut lebih daripada 45,000 nyawa, dan dicatatkan lebih daripada 108,000 daripada mereka yang telah tercedera. Dan ia diburukkan lagi dengan tahap sistem kesihatan di Palestin yang kini diambang kehancuran selepas satu-satunya hospital yang masih berfungsi di Beit Lahya, iaitu yang berada di utara Gaza, iaitu Hospital Kamal Adwan, telah diserang pada Jumaat lepas. Serangan ini telah menyebabkan kemudahan perubatan, lumpuh dan ribuan mereka yang tercedera kini terbiar tanpa mendapat rawatan yang sewajarnya. Sementara itu, yang kita juga tahu, lebih 1.9 juta rakyat Palestin kini kehilangan tempat tinggal atau dipaksa meninggalkan rumah mereka yang telah musnah dan kini berhadapan dengan keadaan yang sangat daif dengan akses yang terhadap tempat tinggal, shelter, makanan dan bantuan perubatan. Keadaan ini pastinya diburukkan lagi dengan kedatangan musim sejuk yang sedang dilalui oleh rakyat Palestin pada waktu ini, yang sehingga sidang media yang kita lakukan pada waktu ini telah dilaporkan 6 orang telah meninggal dunia kerana hipotermia, termasuk 4 daripadanya adalah daripada kalangan bayi yang seawal umur 20 hari. Dan di Syria pula, peperangan yang berlangsung lebih 13 tahun telah memusnahkan kehidupan jutaan orang. Lebih 14 juta rakyat Syria telah kehilangan tempat tinggal, termasuk 7.2 juta orang yang menjadi pelarian di dalam negara mereka yang sendiri, dan 16.7 juta orang memerlukan bantuan kemanusiaan dengan segera. Walaupun berdepan dengan pelbagai cabaran, kejayaan rakyat Syria untuk menumbangkan kepimpinan Bashar al-Assad pada 8 Disember 2024 baru-baru ini telah memberikan sedikit harapan, di mana lebih 100,000 pelarian Syria telah mula kembali ke tanah air mereka dan berusaha untuk membina kembali negara mereka yang telah dimusnahkan. Namun pastinya kekurangan sumber yang mencukupi, tempat tinggal dan keperluan asas pastinya menjadi satu cabaran yang besar dan menjadikan perjuangan untuk memulakan kembali kehidupan mereka menjadi sangat berat dan memerlukan bantuan kita dengan segera. Berhadapan dengan musim sejuk dengan serba kekurangan memberikan impak dan risiko yang besar kepada rakyat Palestin dan juga Syria. Ribuan keluarga, terutamanya kanak-kanak dan warga emas, kini terdedah dengan suhu beku, dengan tempat perlindungan yang tidak mencukupi dan bekalan keperluan asasi yang sangat terhad. Maka tanpa bantuan segera pastinya lebih banyak nyawa yang akan terancam. Justru sebagai tindak balas terhadap krisis yang sedang berlaku pada waktu ini di bumi Palestin dan juga Syria, Global Peace Mission Malaysia pada hari ini melancarkan rayuan RM1 juta bantuan kemanusiaan ataupun bantuan kecemasan musim sejuk untuk Syria dan Gaza. Inisiatif ini bertujuan untuk menyediakan bantuan seperti selimut, baju musim sejuk, alat pemanas beserta bahan bakar, bekalan makanan dan juga kit perubatan. Dan juga saya maklumkan pada hari ini bahawa petugas JPM dijangka akan melaksanakan misi ke Syria pada 15 Januari 2025 yang akan datang, dan manakala bantuan untuk Gaza juga sedang diuruskan dan sedang diteruskan secara langsung oleh pengurus JPM Gaza Dr. Tariq Al-Talmas yang kini berada di sana. Justru JPM menyuruh kepada seluruh masyarakat Malaysia yang budiman untuk menyokong usaha ini dengan menyalurkan sumbangan ke tabung musim sejuk Syria dan Gaza di pautan jomsedekah.com/winteremergency2024 atau pindahan wang ke akaun Maybank 5642 2161 1602 dengan rujukan Winter Emergency. Dan usaha ini juga akan digerakkan secara bersama dengan rakan-rakan NGO daripada negara-negara ASEAN seperti Indonesia, Filipina dan juga Thailand. Jadi sebarang pertanyaan berkaitan urusan sumbangan untuk emergency relief musim sejuk Syria dan Gaza, boleh berhubung dengan pejabat GPM di talian 03 4144 3441 atau email salam@gpm.com.my. Dan sekian kami maklumkan berkaitan dengan kenyataan media berkaitan misi musim sejuk yang sedang dihadapi oleh rakyat Palestin dan juga Syria. Sekian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Terima kasih atas penyampaian kenyataan media disampaikan oleh saudara Syahrir sebentar tadi. Itulah kenyataan dan realiti yang berlaku kepada negara-negara yang sedang melalui peperangan ini. Mereka ni dah melalui satu fasa yang sangat tinggi risikonya, berada dalam keadaan yang berperang, tidak ada tempat pulang dan sebagainya, ditambah pula dengan keadaan musim sejuk yang mana mereka tak ada alat pemanas, tak ada tempat pelindungan, tak ada apa-apa kemudahan yang memudahkan mereka atau membantu mereka untuk melalui musim sejuk ini. Jadi sekali lagi saya menyahut apa yang dibacakan oleh saudara Syahrir tadi untuk sama-sama kita menyalurkan sedikit sumbangan ataupun apa-apa yang rezeki yang lebih yang ada pada kita untuk kita sama-sama bantu saudara-saudara kita yang berada di Palestin dan juga di Syria. Barangkali sedikit, tapi insyaAllah kalau kita kumpulkan beramai-ramai, besar impaknya kepada saudara-saudara kita di sana. Jadi insyaAllah kita sambung kepada sesi yang seterusnya, itu sedikit tayangan video untuk kita punya appeal Winter Mission Syria dan juga Palestin.
As winter arrives into Gaza, thousands of the families in the IDP camps face the cold and the bad weather without adequate protection. We can make a difference by providing plastic sheets. We can help protecting families and ensuring their safety during this winter.
وبارك الله فيكم على ما قدمتوا لنا وبارك الله فيكم.
This winter, you have the power to to bring warmth and protection to those in need. Every donation counts. Join us in making a difference. As winter arrives into Gaza, thousands of the families in the IDP camps face the cold and the bad weather without adequate protection. We can make a difference by providing plastic sheets. We can help protecting families and ensuring their safety during this winter. As winter arrives into Gaza, thousands of the families in the IDP camps face the cold and the bad weather without adequate protection.
وبارك الله فيكم على قدمتوا لنا وبارك الله فيكم.
We can make a difference by providing plastic sheets. We can help protecting families and ensuring their safety during this winter. This winter, you have the power to bring warmth and protection to those in need. Every donation counts. Join us in making a difference.
وبارك الله فيكم على قدمتوا لنا وبارك الله فيكم.
This winter, you have the power to bring warmth and protection to those in need. Every donation counts. Join us in making a difference.
Itulah tadi tuan-puan, realiti yang berlaku di Syria dan juga Gaza. Itu bukanlah lakonan, tapi itu realiti yang berlaku. Mereka yang terpaksa bersusah payah di kala musim sejuk yang sedang melanda, keadaan dan situasinya yang tidak berkasut. Kalau tuan-puan pernah pergi keluar negara, barangkali bermain salji dan sebagainya, memakai baju tebal, kita ada akses untuk beli pakaian-pakaian musim sejuk, stokin, kasut. Mereka ni tak ada akses, tak ada tempat perlindungan. Dan yang di video kedua tadi adalah sahabat kami, Dr. Tariq Al-Tamas, yang merupakan pengurus GPM di Gaza, yang kita sama-sama bekalkan satu sheet plastik yang untuk menghalang daripada angin-angin sejuk bertiup dan masuk ke dalam kemah. Itu sedikit daripada bantuan yang kita cuba sampaikan sesegera mungkin untuk mereka menempuhi musim sejuk yang sedang berlaku sekarang. Jadi tuan-puan, jika anda mempunyai sebarang soalan, boleh tinggalkan soalan anda di ruangan komen dan saya akan bacakan. Dan tetamu-tetamu yang berada bersama-sama kami pada hari ini juga, jika ada soalan yang ingin ditanyakan kepada saudara Syahrir ataupun Dr. Kutub, boleh ajukan soalan anda. Dipersilakan jika ada. Daripada media, kalau ada soalan boleh terus ditanyakan. Sambil-sambil itu tim teknikal media saya boleh tolong semak kalau ada soalan-soalan yang diajukan oleh penonton secara maya kita. Ada soalan? Boleh? Saya paskan.
Okay, boleh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have a question for Dr. Kutub about the land of the Shams. So we know that the power vacuum happened in Syria after the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. With the aggressiveness of the atrocities of the Israelis attack the civilians, because we know that the way or the road to the Baitul Maqdis starting from the Dimash. So this is about a bit of the political questions, but it is possible. I just wondering, is it possible after we topple the Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party from the dominating the politics in Israel, it is possible maybe the new government of the Israel maybe tone down their atrocities or aggressiveness toward the civilians in the Palestine, or and attacking Syria. This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, brother. It seems like a question more about Israel, more than about Sham or about Syria. You did mention the power vacuum. Let me just say, yes, obviously there would be a slight power vacuum, which some of the criminals try to take advantage of. So we saw in the beginning some people trying to loot the central bank, right? Go and grab some money and run away, right? They were caught, right? Many of the criminals were caught trying to do things like this. Though immediately, yes, of course, there's a huge power vacuum, but people were impressed at how quickly they were able to assume some kind of power. So already now, we are talking about a lot of properties being returned to its rightful owners. So the Assad regime, in many situations, took a lot of properties and confiscated it, and it became for them, right? So now a lot of these places, including in one of them, became one of his palaces. It actually belongs to a family. It is being returned now to the families as we speak. All of these properties are being returned now to their rightful owners. Imagine that. So a lot of things are happening. They're trying to do as much as they can in order to enforce some semblance of authority, and the people themselves are very happy to do so. So from the very beginning, a lot of the Syrian people themselves, and I'll get to Israel, a lot of the Syrian people themselves started forming committees for helping out in terms of security, right? If they know some of the criminals who were Assad supporters, if someone's store was robbed or looted, or there are some people trying to do some kind of sabotaging of the different stores and places and houses, people were there. So people are now volunteering also to try to help those in power. So this is one point. The second point now, yes, of course, Israel was going to do this. It was quite expected that they would do something like this. We know that they are after more and more land. They want all of Palestine, but Palestine is small. They don't only want Palestine. They want all of biblical Israel, as you well know, right? The greater Israel. And I've talked about this a lot in my videos and stuff. You can find it on my channel. So the greater Israel, of course, includes all of Sham. And even someone like Amr Musa, who is a diplomat, right, said that they are after parts of Jordan and parts of Saudi Arabia as well, and Egypt. We know, because biblical Israel contains all of that. Sinai, maybe part of North Saudi, all of Sham. So this is what they're after is the biblical Israel, right? You might say, oh, this is kind of maybe, you find this in the social media and this and that. It's not official government policy. I tell you, Ariel Sharon, before he died, he was trying to make it official government policy, that we want biblical Israel, greater Israel, right? What they call the Israel of the Bible. So they will always try to grab land, and that's what they did here. Will things get better if there's another government? Absolutely. We know that this is one of the most extreme governments. The Likud government is one of the most extreme governments, right? Does that mean Palestine, they will give Palestine back? No, of course not, right? They truly believe this is their land. They came back to their land. They call it their land historically. They continue to claim there was no one there when they came. SubhanAllah, the Palestinian people, millions of them were not actually there. They were ghosts. And they came a land without a people for a people without a land. SubhanAllah. By the way, this echoes what some of the colonialists did when they came to America as well. The first colonialists back to the 17th century, when they first came, of course there were Native Americans there, right? They said the same thing. There was nobody there. We came and there was nobody there, subhanallah. And that's why until now, Native Americans, they call for their rights from that time. So the Israelis came, they took the land. It's not like they're going to give it back. They established it after many decades of plotting and work, and we might even say centuries of preparation for that moment in 1948 when they established the state. But will it become better? Yes. This is one of the most extreme governments, right? Netanyahu specifically, and the people around him. People like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, these guys are terrorists. They're criminals, right? Others are better. Ehud Barak, spoke many times, and he said he's completely against what's happening now. And some of them, they want to stop the war and get the hostages back. Some of them may even talk about, a two-state solution and things like that. So yes, other governments and administrations would be more moderate, but not to the extent of giving the land back and liberating the Palestinians, right? Okay, they'll talk about a state on part of the land. What part of the land? Gaza and the West Bank? What percentage of Palestine is Gaza and the West Bank? 22%? That's if it is a contiguous territory. It's not, as you know. Gaza is destroyed, the West Bank, and of course all of the checkpoints and the wall. So it's not even a full solid 22%. But this is what they are negotiating for now. So you get some 78% of original Palestine and you give 22%. So even then, it's not an acceptable solution. I think there's a question
Saya nak tanya berkenaan dengan bantuan yang akan disalurkan sempena musim sejuk di Gaza. Mungkin Encik Syarul boleh kongsikan gambaran yang lebih jelas, sebab kita tahu ada ribuan trak bantuan kemanusiaan yang sedang menunggu untuk masuk menghantar bantuan kemanusiaan kepada penduduk di Gaza. Tetapi yang terbaru pada November, Israel hanya membenarkan kira-kira hanya 30 trak bantuan kemanusiaan sahaja masuk ke Gaza. Jadi bagaimana mungkin daripada pihak pengurus GBM dekat Gaza, Dr. Tariq Talmas yang ada dekat sana, boleh memberi satu kepastian bahawa penyaluran derma itu dengan membeli barang-barang keperluan yang dimaksudkan ini dapat sampai kepada golongan sasaran di sana, kerana kita juga sedia maklum seperti kit perubatan dan makanan mempunyai tarikh tempoh tamat dan sebagainya. Mungkin boleh bagi gambaran yang lebih jelas.
Baik, terima kasih di atas soalan yang diberikan. Pastinya ramai juga yang bertanya-tanya ataupun terfikir macam mana sebenarnya bantuan boleh masuk ke dalam Syria, ke dalam Palestin, ke dalam Gaza dan sebagainya dalam keadaan Israel menyekat trak-trak bantuan masuk ke dalam Gaza dan sebagainya. Perlu diingat juga bahawa yang disekat oleh Israel ini adalah trak-trak bantuan, tetapi apa yang tidak disekat oleh Israel adalah trak-trak yang berkaitan dengan bisnes, yang berkaitan dengan apa orang kata, trade, masih lagi masuk ke dalam Gaza dalam pelbagai cara, sama ada dia melalui West Bank, sama ada dia melalui negara Jordan ataupun melalui negara-negara yang bersempadan dengan Palestin itu sendiri, masih lagi dibawa masuk ke dalam Palestin, tetapi pastinya dengan harga yang lebih mahal. Namun begitu, yang kita sebutkan trak-trak bantuan yang tersekat di Sempadan itu adalah trak bantuan yang telah dibeli daripada luar. Tetapi apa yang digerakkan oleh Global Peace Mission Malaysia dan juga banyak juga rakan-rakan NGO yang lain adalah, instead of kita menunggu sahaja barang bantuan itu masuk, sama ada tak tahu masuk bila dan sebagainya, kita terpaksa incur a little bit cost yang lebih tinggi, tetapi demi untuk menyelamatkan nyawa, kita terpaksa untuk membeli pada harga yang lebih tinggi, pada harga pasaran yang lebih tinggi, yang sememangnya walaupun sumbernya mungkin sedikit yang berada di dalam Gaza, tetapi dengan bantuan yang kita dapat hantar ataupun dapat kita basically salurkan duit kita kepada mereka ini, mereka kita punya pengurus besar GPM Gaza Dr. Tarik Almas mampu untuk mengeluarkan duit ini untuk membeli barang-barang yang berada di pasaran walaupun dengan harga yang kalau saya boleh sebutkan sebagai relatively very high daripada kebiasaannya. Tetapi apa option, what are the options yang ada? Apa option yang ada kepada rakyat Gaza? Kalau sebelum ni Dr. Tarik juga ada pernah berkongsikan bahawa ada beberapa vegetable sahaja, sayur-sayuran, tomato sedikit dan sebagainya, yang bernilai hampir $20, which is dalam RM100 adalah satu tomato, satu timun dan sebagainya. Tapi demi untuk kelangsungan kehidupan, keperluan ini ada sahaja sebenarnya di dalam pasaran di Gaza, tetapi dalam keadaan orang Palestin sekarang, mereka tidak ada kemampuan, tidak ada duit dan sebagainya, jadi mereka sangat-sangat mengharapkan bantuan daripada luar, dari sudut sumbangan duit dan sebagainya, untuk kita membeli barang-barang ini daripada pasaran yang ada, yang dibawa masuk dari sudut trading way, instead of barang bantuan dalam bentuk trak-trak bantuan daripada luar. Itu yang saya boleh beri respon lah setakat ni. Alright, terima kasih.
Terima kasih atas soalan yang disampaikan. Saya buka kalau ada lagi beberapa soalan. Kita tidak menerima soalan dari media sosial. Okey, baik. Kalau tidak ada, bermakna apa yang disampaikan oleh saudara Syahri tadi adalah sebagai penutup kita punya sesi sidang media pada hari ini. Jadi insya-Allah sama-sama kita doakan supaya tim daripada Global Peace Mission Malaysia GPM dapat menyampaikan segera bantuan musim sejuk ke Syria dan juga Palestin, untuk sama-sama kita membantu segera mereka yang memerlukan di kedua-dua buah negara. Dan saya juga maklum yang ada negara-negara lain juga selain daripada Syria dan juga Palestin yang turut dibantu oleh Global Peace Mission Malaysia GPM untuk musim sejuk ini. Jadi saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada semua yang bersama-sama kami daripada awal sehingga penutup. Saya ucapkan terima kasih juga kepada petugas media yang hadir bersama-sama kami pada hari ini. Dengan itu, sekian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan sebelum tutup, kita ada sedikit sesi bergambar untuk peluncuran Winter Aid for Syria dan juga Winter Aid for Gaza. Dah berdiri.